Like literally out.
Good evening. I see some people are still filing in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Piper Campbell. I am the chair of the Department of Foreign Policy and Global Security here at the School of International Service. I'm also the director of the ASEAN and Indo-Pacific Studies Initiative, and along with Ambassador Tony Wayne, one of the leaders and organizers of a event series that we like to call Ambassadors Up Close, because we think one of the really important things about AU is finding the ways to connect our students and the broader community with the diplomatic community here in Washington, D.C. And we're especially pleased this evening that this Ambassadors Up Close session is coordinating and working with AU's very own Global Graduate Leadership Council. And so we're happy to be teaming with them, including in order to bring you some delicious Filipino food, which will be on offer after the session. Ambassador Jose Manuel del Galago Romualdez was appointed Philippine ambassador to the US in 2017 by then President Rodrigo Duterte and presented his credentials shortly thereafter to then US President Donald J. Trump. Ambassador Romualdez was reappointed by President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. and served in Washington for the duration of the Biden administration. Note the Romualdez name in common. I believe they are first cousins. Second. We can say emphatically that Ambassador Romualdez has served through interesting and changing times and must now be one of the most senior, not the most senior, but one of the most senior members of the Washington, D.C. Diplomatic Corps. Interestingly, before serving as ambassador, Romualdez was designated as a special envoy of the Philippine president to the United States. I make note of that because various countries are talking these days about whether designating individuals with special perspectives on bilateral relations might be a wise move with the Trump administration. Of particular relevance for tonight's topic, Ambassador Romualdez has extensive experience as a media practitioner and business executive. He was CEO of Stargate, I think, and still is CEO of Stargate Media Corporation, publisher of People Asia magazine, president of the Manila Overseas Press Club, and still is a very popular columnist for the Philippine Star. Born and raised in Manila, Ambassador Romualdez has a BA from De La Salle University, and maybe conveniently golfs as a pastime. We are honored to host tonight the man who journalist Richard Hidarian called one of the most influential Filipino diplomats in recent memory. Ambassador Romualdez will deliver remarks from the podium. Then our distinguished diplomat and my colleague and my partner in the Ambassadors Up Close series, Ambassador Tony Wayne, and I will have a short conversation with Ambassador Romualdez on the stage. After that fireside chat, I do think it's still cold enough to call it a fireside chat. After that fireside chat, we'll open it to questions from the audience before ending with a networking event with food organized, as this whole evening was, by AU's Graduate Leadership Council. Ambassador Romualdez, we're eager to invite you to the podium.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Campbell. It's always good to be around two ambassadors, Ambassador Wayne. Well, members of the American University Graduate Leadership Council, the academics and professionals working in the public diplomacy space, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. And magandang hapon sa inyong lahat in Tagalog, meaning to say good afternoon or good evening. I am pleased to be invited to this event actually because, and this is the first time I've been here inside the American University. I always pass through here all the time. I always wondered what it would be like to go and maybe one day I may want to go back to school, but I guess it's too late for that.
Never do it.
But these are really interesting times, not only here in the United States, but also all over the world. Since what happens in our country, in this country, is of a considerable consequence to many of us around the world. Public diplomacy has been defined in various ways over the years, and the following is one such definition, which is specific to the Philippine Foreign Service, and I quote, "The application of management, representation, communication, and negotiation skills in the Department of Foreign Affairs, relations with the domestic and international publics with the purpose of creating awareness, discussion, openness, and support of the Department of Foreign Affairs work," unquote. Students of international relations will find similarities between this definition and Joseph Nye's concept of soft power, which refers to the ability to persuade rather than coerce in order to achieve foreign policy objectives. For countries such as the Philippines, which have less hard power or traditional military or economic might, soft power becomes even more important for us. There are numerous tools of public diplomacy, that is, various ways in persuading or garner support for one's own foreign policy objectives. These include, but are not limited to, providing aid, promoting arts and culture, participating in educational exchanges, and utilizing media. I myself am not a diplomat by training, and my previous life I was a media practitioner. In fact, I still maintain a weekly column, as I told Ambassador Campbell, in a major Philippine broadsheet where I share insights about my work here as ambassador. And in this sense, I prefer to think of public diplomacy in more literal terms. At the risk of a circular definition, public definition is diplomacy directed at the public as opposed to traditional diplomacy, which involves discussing and negotiating foreign policy in the confines of meeting rooms and conference halls between and among government officials. The rise of mass media and now social media has expanded the reach of diplomats, enabling them to persuade not only their counterparts, but also various public audiences. With a larger audience than ever before, it has become increasingly important for the Foreign Service officers to be skilled communicators. And having experienced both sides of the fence or the divide between government and the public, I have identified three qualities of effective public diplomacy practitioners. First, accessibility. Diplomats must endeavor to be within reach of their stakeholders. Second, transparency. Once engaged, diplomats must communicate messages that are clear, timely, and accurate. And third, reputation. Diplomats must consistently deliver on the first two qualities to cultivate an image of credibility. I strongly believe that the effective use of public diplomacy has greatly enhanced Philippine-US relations. Although our countries already share historic ties, the efforts of many US ambassadors to the Philippines to engage with the Filipino public have allowed relations to flourish rather than stagnate. Some US ambassadors have been or even become beloved personalities in our country. Public opinion of the United States among Filipinos remains overwhelmingly positive, and I would like to think that this is not by accident. On my part, I make it a point to be available to as many engagements or for many engagements as possible, which my schedule will allow. And here in Washington and across the United States, I also make an effort to move around as much as I can. The message I convey remains consistent. It is in the interest of the United States to support the Philippines' interests, from our military modernization and economic development to the welfare and protection of Filipinos in this country. We aim to be an equal partner of the United States, ensuring that our alliance endures beyond administrations and even generations. A recent example of public diplomacy through media that directly supported our political security policy goals was a feature on the West Philippine Sea that aired on the acclaimed program 60 Minutes in September of last year. A TV crew from the show boarded one of our Philippine Coast Guard vessels conducting regular resupply missions to one of the features in our exclusive economic zone, and they witnessed and recorded Chinese aggression firsthand. The feature went on to garner significant attention from the US public and even lawmakers as well, and politicians who reaffirmed their support for the Philippines' defense modernization following the program. This would not have been possible without efforts to cultivate media relations on the part of our embassy. Shifting gears slightly, one public diplomacy tool unique to the Philippines that diplomats of the other nationalities may not have is our diaspora. There are approximately 4.3 million Filipinos and Filipino Americans in the United States. And I'm very pleased to see some of them who are here, who traveled 3 hours. Thank you very much for being here. I would do the same if I had to. Thank you. They are other constituents and clients, but they also are fellow ambassadors of our country. While not every overseas Filipinos finds a reason to advocate for the Philippines while abroad, many are very proud of their roots. Through their hospitality, hard work, and humility, Filipinos have come to be regarded very highly by many Americans everywhere. So much so that Filipino American History Month is celebrated annually every October and recognized by the White House and Congress. This positive image is a great boon to our embassy's efforts to promote Philippine interests. Therefore, part of our public diplomacy efforts is geared towards maximizing the unique resource and translating our diaspora's potential into tangible benefits. For instance, our Department of Tourism has an ongoing campaign called Bisita, Be My Guest, where overseas Filipinos are incentivized to invite foreigners to visit the Philippines. Both sponsors and invitees can claim discounts, special rates, and incentives from accredited tourism establishments. This is a prime example of public diplomacy at its best, producing tangibles benefiting in the form of tourism revenue. I would like to dedicate more time to the panel discussion, so I'll stop right here. Maraming salamat po, which translates to thank you very much, and I look forward to our candid discussions. Thank you.
You mentioned the Philippine diaspora. I should tell you that some of my best students have been Filipinos. And in fact, we have at least 1 or 2 of them in the audience. So we're really pleased to continue the connections between American University and the Philippine Embassy. And thank you so much for those comments. You spoke about the importance of both accessibility and reputation, as well as soft power. So I thought I'd start with a softball. My first tour in the Foreign Service more than 35 years ago was in the Philippines. And one of the things I enjoyed most as a young Foreign Service officer was learning the nicknames of all of so many of my friends and colleagues. So I have to ask, Babe, tell us the story of your nickname. And because I can only imagine it makes you more accessible as a colleague and as an interlocutor.
Well, thank you. I'm glad I'm able to explain the reason why I'm called Babe. Well, basically, when you're the youngest in the family, and I was the youngest for about 10 years before my younger brother came around. So I was called the baby. But then in the early 50s, shows you my age, my mother is a baseball fan, and she loved the New York Yankees. And if you remember Babe Ruth, he actually came to the Philippines for an exhibition match or something for baseball, and she just loved the way he played baseball, and so she called me Babe, and that's why I'm called Babe. And in fact, just to show you, I even give her a Babe Ruth once in a while, the Babe Ruth candy. That's right. But that's the reason why they call me Babe.
That's a pretty exciting reason. I enjoyed Babe Ruth baseball when I was a kid. We got to play in that. So in thinking about that, we have long ties between the United States and the Philippines. It's been a challenge to maintain and keep that relationship lively and evolving over the years. So what have you come to focus on as important elements between the United States and the Philippines as you look at public diplomacy, your public speeches, and then building on that as you go around the country?
Well, I think the most important thing for us is precisely the people-to-people ties that we have with the United States. I think that there is no doubt that it's probably the strongest asset that we have in terms of how we develop our relationship here. And this is rightly so. I've been here for 7 years now, and I was the ambassador of then President Duterte. And during that time, we had a lot of issues surrounding President Duterte's presidency. And so every time I would go to the US Congress, or they would ask me to go to the US Congress, one of the main things, the issues that we would talk about are human rights because of the drug war that President Duterte had. So we would have very strong discussions, sometimes a little bit heated to a certain extent. But I would try to explain as much as I could that this was part of his program and that we would do what we can, rule of law and whatever it is. But at the end of the day, or at the end of our discussion, we would end up always talking about the Filipino Americans in their district and how much they appreciate and how much they're so proud of the Filipino American who are working in their communities. And that, of course, gives us a little bit of pause on how our relationship is. And so that's why I always say that is our soft power, the soft power that we have a number of Filipino Americans who've done well here in the United States, contribute to the community. They're successful in everything that most of them, especially in the field of healthcare and businesses as well. So that, I think, is our biggest asset in contributing to very good diplomacy that we have here in the United States.
Mentioning President Duterte, I know that for you, one of the most important engagements with President Duterte was on the Visiting Forces Agreement, and as well as on securing COVID vaccines for the Philippines. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you represented the Philippines here in the United States in order to engage with the US government and persuade them to release some vaccine to the Philippines, and then how you conveyed to President Duterte the importance of moving forward on those issues.
Well, I think everyone knows that President Duterte was not a great fan of the United States. I guess he had some personal ill feelings towards the United States. A lot of it's personal in nature, but some of it, he was a mayor of a city, and there was a certain incident there where an American was involved in a bombing incident, where I think because it was in his city, he wanted the American to be tried and prosecuted in the Philippines. But I think the U.S. government then wanted to bring him back to the United States, and so there was that particular incident that stayed with him. So it was very difficult for me, very challenging at that time, especially when the new administration of President Biden then, obviously they saw the Philippines as a very important ally and that they needed the Philippines. We play a major role since we are right in the center of where the South China Sea. We're in the forefront, so to speak. And so the visiting forces agreement was an important part of that equation. And President Duterte wanted to abrogate that agreement, and he really said that we don't need American forces in our country. We need to have more better relations with China because we feel that China is our neighbor. They're the ones that can actually help us more than the United States, so forth and so on. It was really quite challenging, very difficult at that time. And it is when, and then of course, COVID, the pandemic was very challenging in the sense that we had, just like here, we had so many people dying and getting sick. And so we had to work on working on trying to get the vaccines as quickly as possible to the Philippines. The Chinese were offering their Sinovac, that was their vaccines. They were giving it, or they were not really giving it, they were selling it to us, while we were also trying to make sure that we will be first down the line on getting the vaccines that were developed by Pfizer and Moderna at that time. And we were able to get a substantial portion of our private sector to buy the initial requirement to take care of our people. And then, of course, President Biden said that we have to give first Americans, and then we will give to our allies. And since we were not we were an ally, but not exactly in the good graces because of that situation, so you could see where we were coming from, and so I had to find a way to get to the White House, and I remember Dr. Elizabeth Cameron was the one in charge of international help to the vaccine, to the COVID, to the COVAX, which is the entity of the United Nations or the WHO that was tasked to give out the vaccines for countries. And so I pleaded with her, and I told her that we really need these vaccines, and I even said, I'm willing to kneel down in front of you. Of course, she told me, please don't do that. But at the same time, I knew that the visiting forces agreement was important. And so I asked to have a Zoom meeting, a private Zoom meeting with President Duterte. And I told him that, Mr. President, I gave him my spiel and how important our relationship is with the United States. And I said that we are an ally. And I said that we have to bring back the visiting forces agreement if we want to be on the top of the list of those vaccines, the donations that are being given in the United States. And I ended up by saying, Mr. President, we don't do this. I said, and really very emotional, I said, many people will die in our country. An hour later, our executive secretary called me and says, tell the Americans that we have the visiting forces, we'll keep it. So I think that was, to me, one of the most important moments of my life, basically, because I felt I was doing something not only for our relationship, but more importantly, we were out to save our people. And they gave him a lot of hope at that time.
Yeah, that's a really special moment. Of course, we've had this close relationship for so many years. We've had ups and downs in it. You brought it back up again. Congratulations on doing that. So now,
A lot of other people.
and a lot of other people helped, and many people remembered this relationship on both sides. Very important relationship. So, what would you say is the direction the relationship is going in right now? Clearly, the Philippines again is playing a central role in our Pacific policies. We have friends. We have rivals. We have people we work with who aren't quite so friendly, but we work with them. We have a big rival across the ocean from you. How would you place the Philippines in U.S. policy as we look at it today?
Well, again, fortunately for me, I've been here since 2017. So I presented my credentials to President Trump. And so more or less, we had an idea of Trump, the first Trump administration, on how we will be dealing with Trump too. And again, fortunately, I also knew quite a number of those that were around President Trump, and some of them are in fact going back. Some of them are still around, and I know that they have some influence with President Trump. So we have kept up that relationship, but I know that President Trump's mantra is America first. They've suspended the U.S. aid to all countries for the next 90 days, which is challenging. And we also see that there is a lot of tension in terms of how they're going to be dealing with China vis-a-vis our relationship, and also not only our relationship, but also the other countries as well in our neighborhood. And Taiwan, of course, is another one. But one of the things that one of the fortunate things that we have is the fact that we've had very strong bilateral or bipartisan support from the U.S. Congress. And so with our interaction with our friends in the U.S. Congress, we've been assured that they will continue with whatever we're doing. And as a matter of fact, they said that we probably will even accelerate it even further. And of course, with the new Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who had a call with our Secretary of Foreign Affairs, there were very good conversation on how our military assistance program, and together with our alliance and even our economic part of our relationship which is also very important for us, will continue and become stronger. I also had the opportunity to have our Defense Secretary, who came here just last week. And I brought him to the White House, and we had a meeting with the new National Security Advisor, which came out to be a very good meeting. And last but not least, I'm not a very good golfer, but I decided to go to Mar-a-Lago at the West Palm Beach. I have a friend who's a member of the Trump International Golf Course. I said, well, I'm going to go there and play golf with you. And of course, we knew that we were going to bump into Trump. So I had an opportunity to have a very good conversation with the president. And he said, you're a beautiful country. I love your country. And I felt very good about that. So, and that was it.
That's very, very good. You have to play all the angles and have them all move in the right direction.
Everything we can do.
I'm going to build on that a little bit. I teach a class on 21st century diplomacy, and we talk in the class quite a bit about sort of the traditional aspects of diplomacy, as well as how diplomacy adapts for every administration, administrations on the sending side and administrations on the receiving side. So if I think people often think about diplomacy as being kind of formal, protocol, those sorts of things. President Trump is somebody who prides himself on working differently and sort of literally throwing out the rule book. So how do diplomats like yourself navigating this new space? What are some things that you've done or that you've seen others do? What are some things you're thinking about doing? And how do you communicate back to Capitol some of the sort of the flex that is going on right now?
Well, as I said, I think with President Trump, personal relationships is very important. And I think I guess every other ambassador knew that. So everybody sent home. Well, it's a bit too late to try to learn how to play golf now. But anyway, the bottom line is that I think they sent word to their home country that President Trump likes to have personal relationships. That's why you had a number of heads of state who made a trek to Mar-a-Lago and visited him, and just to have that. President Marcos wanted to come, but of course, he was educated in a different way. He went to school in England, so he is a little more proper. He wouldn't just show up and just say, hi, I'm here. But the good thing is we obviously arranged for him to have a telephone call to congratulate President Trump. And it's fortunate that the Marcos family had the relationship with President Trump. Mrs. Imelda Marcos, who was frequently visited New York, really actually knew with President Trump. And so the conversation with President Marcos was with President Marcos and President Trump was that, how is your mother? And I knew her; she's a beautiful woman, and so forth, and that the Philippines is a good country, is a close friend of ours, and so that kind of broke the ice, and which is again that kind of diplomacy or that kind of relationship. I guess it's not only because President Trump really believes in personal relationships, but I think personal relationships at the end of the day is what diplomacy is all about. It's more of how you connect to the person that you're dealing with, not only the head of state, but even the people that you deal with every day in anyone. Ordinary Americans, ordinary people around is the only way to be able to communicate and to be able to bring out what the relationship between the Philippines and the United States is all about.
I think that's right. That works for the president of the country. It also works for governors. It works for mayors. It works for others around this country. And you've had a number of years now to go out and discover. You already knew the United States. Go out and discover more of it. So, what would you say are sort of some of the key factors as you look around the United States, building relations, not just in Washington, but in California, where I grew up, and I remember many Filipino Americans in California in very big positions and some modest positions. But what lessons have you drawn from this in building these ties across the United States?
Well, for one thing, I think, which is what I hear you're going to be serving later, is good Filipino food is one way to show. And we were proud of the fact that many Americans are now like the famous adobo and the lumpia and the pancit. And we use that in every way we can to be able to connect to people. In fact, she was my neighbor for a while here in Washington, D.C., Vice President Kamala Harris, whom we got to know quite well. And she said that she liked adobo. So we had our embassy chef prepare adobo for her, and we sent it to her. So again, there are many ways of being able to be able to use whatever we have to be able to connect to the people, and so whenever and that's why when we go to many of the places, and in all 50 states, we have a fairly good number of Filipino Americans, including Juneau, Alaska, where I went to visit, in Fairbanks, in almost everywhere. I'm very proud to see that we have a number of them working and living in this states all over the country.
I think this is the last question from the stage. And so I just would invite the audience to start thinking of your questions. And after Ambassador Romualdez has answered this one, we'll invite people to come to take to line up and pose questions. So I heard you say that it is in the US interest to support the Philippines' interests. And I'd like to sort of pull on that thread a little bit and ask you why. Persuade me that it's in the US interests to support Philippine interests.
Well, it's always a two-way street. I really believe that there is no such thing as a free lunch. And so even now, what we're saying here in the United States is that we're not here to put our hand this way. We're here because we are friends. We have good relations, so we put out our hand this way, basically this way, to shake a hand. We are partners, and that it is important for the United States to have an ally like the Philippines, because especially with the challenges that we face today, I have absolutely no doubt that today's challenges will continue for the next decade or so, especially with China challenging the United States. They are out to be the #1 country in the world. They want to dominate the world. And I can argue with anyone that will say otherwise. And we have been standing with the United States for a very long time. We fought together in World War II. Many of our soldiers, many of our countrymen died for both the American and the Filipino flag. I think with that alone, you can see the kind of relationship that we've had. It's been there for many, many years, for decades. In fact, next year, we're celebrating our 80th anniversary for the diplomatic relations. This year, we're not celebrating, but we're solemnly remembering the 80th anniversary of the American cemetery in the Philippines, one of the largest in the world, where many Americans are buried in our grounds, in our holy grounds in the Philippines, right in the center of the city of Makati. So all that simply translates into one thing, the value that our relationship is. And that's the reason why it is in the interest of the United States that we continue this relationship. As I said, we have a number of Filipino Americans who are doing extremely well in this country, very well appreciated because of what the work they've done. And needless to say, during COVID, I think many of our Filipino American nurses played a major role. In fact, President Bush Jr., in one event when I came up to him and he says, your Filipino nurse took care of my father before he died. And so all that, the connection alone is, you can see very clearly that it is something that I think both our countries must continue to nurture and to value it, to put a lot of value in this one.
All right, we will invite people to come up to the microphone. Please don't be shy, come on up. And when you do come up, please introduce yourself with your program and go ahead. So I think I see our first question is a student.
Thank you, Ambassador, so much for your time. And my name is Ito. I'm a member of the IIPA program. And while it is not your official role, I did want to gauge you because I'm very happy to hear that Trump is familiar and confident in our relationship with the Philippines. But one of his cabinet members, Pete Hegseth, did forget one aspect of the partnership when he was confirmed, and that was America's relationship with ASEAN. Now, we just started the new chairmanship with Malaysia. So on the broader context, I wanted to hear as a representative of the Philippines, what are your goals and anticipations for this upcoming chairmanship of ASEAN? And also in a more marketing department, I guess, how would you suggest the Philippines and Americans should convince, in a way, of ASEAN's importance to America's policies in Asia and of the Philippines as a leader in ASEAN?
Well, first and foremost, ASEAN, we're 10 countries strong, and we're going to have an 11th country that will probably be joining us soon. That is the Timor-Leste. And we are a bigger market than China. And we have 650 million people in the ASEAN region. And the trade between the United States and the ASEAN countries is probably, I would say, a little bigger or much bigger, much bigger actually than China. And because if you see what's going on is that China is challenging the United States. There's a lot of trade, a trade war basically that's looming or that is continuing between two countries, between the United States and China. And so I think that ASEAN is a major player right now, as it is. And so with the Philippines as one of the major allies of the United States, we continue to tell our ASEAN neighbors that our relationship with the United States as ASEAN is important. And many other countries in the ASEAN also feel that our relationship with China is important. Of course, we want to have relations with all countries, large economies like China and the United States. And with Malaysia being the chairman next year,
they too have, in some way or another, feel the same way, that we have to have very good relations with two countries, two great economies, China and the United States. And I see that this trend will continue, that this type of relationship will continue to grow. But more importantly, the ASEAN is going to be the biggest market that the United States will have in terms of trade.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's always interesting to hear you. I'm Johanna Mendelson Foreman. I'm a professor here at SIS, and I'm also at the Stimson Center where I'm a distinguished fellow. But I'm here to talk about something you mentioned. I teach about food and culinary diplomacy and gastrodiplomacy. I gave up my life on civil military relations long ago to work on that. And you have a very good tool for public diplomacy. Food, you mentioned it yourself that I can't remember, somebody loved adobo, but how would you, in your position here in Washington, use that platform to create a more robust campaign of nation branding that really educates even someone like our new Secretary of Defense, that even if he doesn't know about ASEAN, he may know about adobo or plastet or one of your wonderful dishes?
Well, thank you for the suggestion. We may just send him adobo.
It may be a bit, or get it on the menu at Mar-a-Lago.
Possibly. Well, like I said, food is the best way. As they say, what is it that there's a saying that the best way to get to a man's stomach is through what you feed him, and man's heart through the stomach. So that always works. And so, in fact, our embassy chef, which I brought along with me here, in my first year here, we entered her into the Embassy Chef Challenge. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Been a judge, thank you.
Oh, you were a judge there.
Not that one, but I've been a judge.
So in 2018, she was voted as the best chef in Washington, D.C., both the People's Choice and the Judge's Choice. And since then, I think the popularity, of the embassy has become a little much wider. We have to have a bigger budget. Anyway, bottom line is food is always a great way to be able to interact, and definitely for everyone who loves to try different kinds of meals. I think the Filipino cuisine is now becoming to be extremely popular in this country.
But it would just be nice to have a more formal campaign, or even to go for a UNESCO World Heritage on some of your dishes.
We would like to very much, and that's a very good suggestion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Feel like there's more and more Filipino restaurants, even here in the Washington.
Yes, there is. There are actually.
Magandang gabi po, Ambassador Romualdez. My name is Kyle Taay. I am an international student from the Philippines and had the distinct privilege of studying under Ambassador Wayne, Ambassador Campbell, and also Professor Foreman, who asked the previous question before me. I studied governance and security here at American University and now work for the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So since you served as our country's ambassador to the United States for both the Marcos and Duterte administrations, I was wondering what personal strategy you employed, since the two administrations had somewhat of a different perspective in terms of how they viewed the Philippines' relationship with the United States. And was it a difficult transition?
Well, I think that President Duterte, as I already mentioned earlier, had a different view of how he looked at not only our relationship with the United States, but on how he felt that sovereignty was a key element of his pronouncements. And so we had to obviously make that very clear, especially to our friends in the U.S. Congress when they were questioning his war on drugs. With President Marcos, I think it's clear that being educated in the West, he has a very clear mind on how we conduct our foreign policy, and that is to be friends to as many countries as we can and continue to make our relationship with the United States even stronger. We were able to do that during the Biden administration. We intend to do that again with the Trump administration. With the Trump administration, as I said earlier, it's all about personal relationships, and I think we've been able to develop quite a number of that, and we will continue to interact with as many people here in people in government, in the incoming administration, or the incoming people that are joining the administration of President Trump. And we will, I'm confident that that kind of relationship that we've had over the past 7 or 8 years will continue to grow. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Ambassador. My name is Carson Keller. I am a master's student with Missouri State University School of Defense and Strategic Studies. I think that you well answered the question of why the U.S. should back Philippines' interests in issues such as the West Philippine Sea and other local security issues. But my question is, with this incoming administration, how would you like to see Trump 2.0 strengthen and enhance U.S.-Philippine bilateral security ties going forward?
Well, I think we would like to obviously see the continuation. I know that there is a little bit of, whenever there's a change, and I think the change quite clearly between President Biden and President Trump is a little bit, I don't know how to describe it, a little bit more, sensitive, maybe, possibly. So what we're trying to communicate with the new administration is that all of the things that we've done actually started during the time of Trump 1.0. If you remember, I don't know, the word ironclad was used by then Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who said that we have an ironclad commitment to the Mutual Defense Treaty. We have had a number of successes, like, for instance, the investment of an American financial company that took over Subic, the Hanjin shipyard that was actually went bankrupt because it's actually a South Korean company that was taken over by Cerberus, a financial company here in the United States that was started by the administration Trump 1.0. So we're just saying that this is a continuation of that first one, went on with the Biden administration, and now we want to continue with whatever was started during his time. And I think that one reverberates quite well in terms of how we will continue to grow our relationship, not only on the military alliance side, but more importantly, I think, in the economic side, because the economic part of our relationship is the more lasting one. This is really what's important. A strong Philippines will be a strong partner to the United States.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ambassador. My name is Gloria. I'm an alumni of the School of International Service, class of 2023. I'm now a business analyst working with the Department of External Affairs at Exelon. My question to you is, in the beginning of your introductory speech, you mentioned the growth of social media in public diplomacy. On January 18th, 2025, TikTok was banned for 12 hours here in the United States. And I wanted to understand from your perspective where you see the future of government involvement in social media. Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of issues surrounding social media. One thing for sure, I can tell you that I believe in the freedom of speech, very much so, but it also can be used to destroy a person. And right now, the Chinese are using social media to destroy people. And I'm not saying that I'm a main victim, but I am one of those targeted. I had to change my phone about 4 or 5 times already. So I even told the Chinese ambassador in the Philippines, please stop going through my telephone because I can't afford to keep on buying a phone. And I really told him that. But they use that as a way to be able to, they send message, they can now send messages supposedly coming from your phone, but it's really being used because they hacked your phone. There are many things that, and of course with AI and all of these things coming into play right now, that's why there's this that's why they had this thing about TikTok because it's owned by the Chinese. And now President Trump suspended it but they still, I think it's now a Supreme Court ruling that it must be owned by an American individual or American company. And I think for national security, that's very important. So social media can be a good tool, but at the same time, it can also be a tool that can actually not only destroy individuals, but destroy relationships between countries. This is quite dangerous in a way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, I think I'm going to suggest we take both questions together. And then that will give you an opportunity to address them both as well as any final thoughts you might have.
Hello, ambassadors. I want to say thank you for coming here and giving me and my peers the opportunity to ask you questions. My name is Spencer. I'm a senior in the School of SIS. And last year was the 10-year anniversary of the Comprehensive Agreement on Bangsamoro between the government in Manila and the Muslim majority in the southern Philippines. However, I don't think its resolutions have really come into fruition yet, as there's still large economic inequality in the Philippines, as well as last week, there was an incident where over a dozen soldiers were injured in the southern Philippines. So what do you think the United States could do to contribute to creating peace in the southern Philippines?
Well, I think yeah, go ahead. I'll take the second.
Hi, I'm Chris Casquejo. I'm a correspondent at Voice of America, and I cover DC for Southeast Asia, including the Philippines. You mentioned economic opportunity. Other than BPO, what do you think are some other areas where the Philippines can grow its relationship with the U.S. economically?
Okay, well, first on the South. Well, the United States has always played a role in terms of especially when it comes to, because of our alliance, obviously, it's important that our armed forces remain to be a strong armed forces. This visiting forces agreement that we have with the United States actually also includes training them to do well in terms of any eventuality whatsoever. And you mentioned that there were a couple of soldiers that were killed or were injured in the South. It's much better than it ever was now because of the new, what we call the BARM, which is really giving them autonomy. It's still in the early stages, and we hope to be able to make that even more relevant and more cohesive in a way that will be able to bring a total peace in the area. As I said, all the factions that were present in the South, we've been able to neutralize many of those that go for armed rebellion and that would like to see the government changed violently. We have a very good BARM governor that is now that is in place. It'll take a little bit more patience, perhaps, but down the road, I think at the end of the day, giving them the kind of autonomy that they have wanted for many, many years is now put in place. But it'll take a lot of effort, a lot of political will, and I think President Marcos has designated one of his closest assistants to be able to really pay attention to it and make sure that before his term ends, that thing will be up and running. Thank you. And on the economic side, I think there are many opportunities that we have. The BPOs are just one of the many because obviously we have a very good English-speaking population. But in the energy area, the Philippines needs a lot of energy. We've been talking to quite a number of American companies in terms of clean air, alternative energy. I know that the current administration of President Trump is not a fan of climate change, but we are. But we will continue to still look for other alternative ways of being able to bring more energy into our country, because right now the Philippines has the highest energy costs, and we want to bring it down to a level that will be conducive for many investors that want to relocate in the Philippines. We also have a very strong population, human resources. So not only in BPO, as I said, but we also have in the healthcare business. We have quite a number of American companies that are coming in to invest in the Philippines. Also in terms, like Federal Express has just expanded their operation in the new Clark City, used to be a Clark Air Base. And we also have shipbuilding. As I said, the Subic Air Base is now a commercial shipbuilding operation that is open to anyone, not only for US Navy, but anyone who wants to build any kind of ships. We have that facility there. So we were working on quite a number of these, not only big ticket items, but items that companies that will be able to have a good working condition, because of the similarities between our systems, that you can be sure that American companies will be well protected in the Philippines, just like they're protected here.
To say that there's clearly a lot we can do between the United States and the Philippines, both bilaterally and in the region. We look forward to that coming about. It's great to have this longevity in your presence here to work on this. And it's been great to have you come and join us and give us an introduction to all that's going on. Piper.
I think the perspective that you bring, both from two administrations in the Philippines and 1.0 and 2.0 Trump, as well as the Biden administration sandwiched within, really provide such an important perspective on continuing to stay focused on shared interests, even across sometimes wavy seas. Thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We now have the opportunity to sample some of this delicious Filipino food that you all were hearing about. And so